Hey Rishab, hi, how are you?
Doing good, Rohit. I just needed your help and I thought it's better to connect with you. So, Rohit, actually,
Great.
I'm working on this new project, which is kind of very extensive and needs very they have a lot of Apex classes and LWCs to work on. And I heard you are working these days as a AI-enabled engineer. So I thought I could take up some recommendation and help and to identify some tools which can help me, code better or do some faster coding and also get my code reviewed, let's say, and to make sure that the code is aligned to the best practices of Salesforce. Do you know some tools which can help me out there?
Yes, there are many tools, but for Salesforce use case, I would definitely recommend Einstein's for developers, which is a tool developed by Salesforce for specific to AI-enabled code generation for Salesforce use cases like Apex, LWC.
Hmm.
So that would be my first recommendation. Then there are other tools as well, which are more general purpose, like GitHub Copilot. And for other use cases, you can use ChatGPT or other LLM-based model like Google Gemini or Claude AI by Anthropic.
Okay. So you talked about this generative thing and something LLM. What are these and can kind of help here?
So LLM means large language models, or generative AI is essentially providing LLM or these models a sort of instruction on the basis of that instruction in the model that they are trained on.
Okay.
They just generate a response which kind of is the most, logically, or the response is sort of a suggestion which aligns with your prompt, and they try to either auto complete your request, or they try to suggest something, or they role play or behave in a specific manner depending on the prompt you give. So generative AI essentially it generates tokens, which are in this case characters or codes.
Okay. And by prompt, you mean the questions that we ask to that particular model, right?
Yes. So prompts
Okay.
are like instructions which we provide in plain English language.
Got it. Got it. Understood. So for my use case specifically, as you know, right, I am working on a Salesforce project which is Apex extensive and kind of have a lot of LWC. So what should I start with? I mean, you recommended some models, but what is the best one I can start with, and the easiest one you can
The
suggest?
best one is Einstein for developers. I can give you a short, intro to how to use it as well. It's
Okay.
like a Salesforce specific tool developed by Salesforce for these use case, and I think that would be the best fit for your use case, just to try it out or get to know as an introduction to it.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah, let's see. Can you show me like how to configure it or how to get started with it?
Sure, sure, I can. Let me present it and give you an overview. So, in your Salesforce org where you're working, there's already a section you will find called Einstein for Developers in Setup. So I've already opened it. You can search for it by going into the quick setup and quick find, type Einstein. So this page just gives you a short overview of what it is, and it gives you a link to VS Code Marketplace, or
Okay.
it gives you a link to its documentation where they have kind of given you the overview of what it is, what the tool is, what's the current capability is, and what kind of data security or trust issues that some projects may have depending on their data being stolen or code. And they provide further more detail and a little bit overview about the code gen model which is used. This is the documentation bit. But to use it, you will need to have. So this tool is exposed as a VS Code extension. Like Salesforce developers, we all are familiar with Visual Studio
Yes.
Code. I think you will be also using it as part of your development for your project. So like other extensions of Salesforce, this is also available within VS Code. So to give you a short overview, I'll just open a project in my VS Code. So this is our Salesforce project directory, SFD directory. I think that's the familiar one. Here you
Okay.
can go to the extensions section. So on the left-hand sidebar, you will see this extensions tab. Here you can just type Einstein or just search for Einstein, and it will give you all the Einstein related extensions which are available. And this should come up right away. The Einstein's for developer beta. Now,
Okay.
beta means like it's not a full-fledged release. It's a early. It's still in its early stages. Like there may be some features which are not completely available, but Salesforce has given some sort of future release date. But as of now, whatever capabilities are available are kind of listed, and I'll walk you through it as well. You can click on install. So this shouldn't take much, and it will be installed. You'll see this Einstein logo in the bottom status bar. So in VS Code, you will see the status bar, and the status will come up as ready. This means that your installation is successful.
Understood.
Once
Okay.
you have installed it, it's pretty straightforward or easier to use. So the moment you install it, you can go back to your project and you will see this new icon appear on the left-hand sidebar with
Understood.
Einstein's,
Develop.
base logo.
Okay.
So that's the installation bit.
I
Now
think
you are ready to use
i-
it.
is that all the steps I need to do about this? I wonder why I was not using this earlier, but thanks for this, Rohit. And if possible, can you show me a few use cases which I can use on day-to-day basis? Because if I know them, then it would be easier to start with Einstein for developers. No?
Sure, we can start with some general or basic day-to-day activities that you do as a Salesforce developer and how you can take
Hmm.
help from Einstein for developers extension. So I'll take a simple example. I'll try to open a Apex, script window where we write anonymous Apex class or create as a scratchpad for our uh,
Mm-hmm.
introduction to this tool. So this is when you click on this tab, you'll see this prompt section. So this is what we talked about. We provide instructions to the model and it replies to us as a result. So here you can provide any prompt which you're working with. So one of the benefits of using Einstein for developers is that it has some context about the windows you have opened or about your project. But we'll get into that later on. Just a gentle introduction, I would say I will try to do few of the things which we do a lot, like writing a SQL query, which is a very common practice that we do in our Apex, right?
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
take an example. I'll take a very simple example. I want to write a SQL query to fetch products and product code. I'll just specify two fields and I'll say that retrieve those two fields for
Mm-hmm.
me from product object, which were created in last 3 months. So it's not
Okay.
super technical. It's more or less like an instruction that you give to your developer that, hey, can you write this query? So it
Okay.
has to be not very technically hard coded into a specific language.
It doesn't need to be a pseudo code or actual code. You can just pass a English conversation to that window.
Exactly.
Okay.
So once you run this query, it will generate a sort of code for you. You can copy this code and actually paste it here, and then you can review it, like what the code is generated. So if you see, it has created a product class.
Okay.
In this class, it has created a method which is returning a list of products. The method name is also kind of generated given the context which you have provided that you want last 3 months, which is equivalent to 90 days. So it has generated a code which is creating a 3 months older date, and then it's writing a query, fetching the required fields which we wanted, and it's kind of uh, is using the 3 months old date to create a where clause in this
Oh,
SOQL query, and it's returning the product. So it's
yeah.
almost usable as per your use case. You can modify it as well, but it kinds of give you something to work on top of. very
Correct.
fast.
And I think this is good because it gives me a method which I can kind of put anywhere in my if I already have something called as product utility in my org, or any other selector classes there, so I can use that inside that. I think this is really helpful. Okay.
Yeah, I can take few more examples just to give you a more broader context. So this is one of the examples that you can generate very fast SOQL or Apex classes. It can also understand what Salesforce different metadatas are, what kind of different functions they have.
Okay.
So instead of querying a SOQL object, this time I'll query instead of querying an object, I'll query a metadata in Salesforce, or I'll ask it to get the metadata records. So let's say I
I
have a product configuration metadata in
Mhm.
my Salesforce org, and I want to retrieve everything associated with it. And I want to use that metadata in my own logic, but I just want to do this part through help from Einstein for developers.
Okay.
So I'll write my prompt, I'll send it
And
out.
if it will generate a SQL, or it will use the methods.
So in this case, since it's a metadata structure, you have option to do it two ways. You can write a SQL query like
Okay.
this
Hmm.
on the metadata configuration product. This is a valid and acceptable use case, which you can use. But for example, let's say you were expecting it to use a different method, like you want to retrieve all the fields, but there are only 3 or 4 fields.
Hmm.
So you may want to, retry this command or
Okay.
even give your same prompt with a different instruction as well. That would also work in this case. So it's not that every time you will generate the similar output for the same instruction, it can sometimes generate output that may not align with what your vision is, right?
And
So in this
yeah.
case, when I do it again, now you can
Mm.
see the output is slightly different. So I'll paste the second output just below it. In this case,
Okay.
you can see it's using get all dot values, which is a inbuilt function available in custom metadata. You must be aware
Okay.
of it.
Understood. Understood. So if we maybe want a different output or something which is not suiting our purpose, we can either change the prompt or retry with the existing prompt that we have.
Yes, you can actually retry multiple times with the same prompt just to see whether it aligns with what you want instead of, you know, editing the generated response a lot. So if you see that okay, the editing part will take few seconds, you just need to make quick changes to it. Then you
Hmm.
can go ahead with that. The end goal is to get assistance, not to get the actual work from it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Does it also kind of write any Apex code? I mean, this is something which we fetched, or I mean, will it be able to write a full pseudocode, or let's say a method which is not very complex but has all the instructions passed in the prompt?
It can actually do that. So you can generate even test classes for it.
Oh,
The test classes may not be very elaborate as per your expectations, but it can generate a basic test class quite well. It can provide you a template or a base to work upon. It can do the work of, writing those boring method definitions or conventions, which sometimes we forget while focusing on the logic. So it can
correct. Yeah, yeah.
improve your productivity in such manner. Although, given complexities of your code, it may not be very well suited to, capture every path within your Apex class for getting that coverage to 75%.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Helpful. Can we try to maybe generate the test class for the method that we just created with help of this Einstein for developers tool? I think this would be a good use case. Getting sending a prompt which would help us to write the code, and then maybe we can reuse Einstein for developers help for generating a test class, as you said, which may not be perfect, but at least it can save some of the developers time for setting up data or something, right?
Yes, exactly. We can do that. So I'm back to the previous example which we had done to generate a SOQL query where we wanted to fetch all the products with some fields like code and name from product class, which were 90 days old. So if I want to generate a test class for it, I can write a prompt here and mention. So I don't even need to provide the actual name or name of the class, but it's always better to be more specific so that it doesn't go
Hmm.
strays further away from what you want. So you can say that write a test class for this class. So in this case, I'm not even specifying it. So it's as an example, I'm just taking. Now this will, since there is only a single class, it will be able to pick this up.
Okay.
So in this case, you can see it has generated a Apex test class with test method. So I'll just paste it below for the sake of better visibility.
Okay.
So it has generated a test class with appropriate conventions like at the rate
Hmm.
is test annotation. It has created a test setup method, and there
This
is
is
a
good.
is test method specific as well.
Hmm.
Now,
Okay.
if you see this code,
Hmm.
it's generating the records, it's generating the price book entry and it's creating the test data essentially that will be required as a part of your test class method. But one of the quirks in our data was that our data has to be at least 90 days old. So you can see that the
Hmm.
created date is nowhere 90 days old. In this case, the created date would be of today. So
Yeah.
unknowingly it may pass the test, but let's say if you want to be very specific that okay, generate or write a test case to test whether the date is more than 90 days old, like you want to test 6 months old. So in this case, you can actually ask Einstein for developers extensions to generate a very specific kind of code. So this was a more of a generic or vanilla prompt. Now,
Yeah.
what if I do write a test class for, I'll provide the class name
Hmm.
and I'm going
Does
to
it have?
delete the pasted code because the context is something which I want to keep it clean for the next round.
Okay.
Write a test class or product utility class. Generate product records
Hmm.
with backdated created dates.
Hmm. This is a good example to kind of test.
Now I've given a more, specific and elaborate prompt where I'm defining, I want specifically some dates which are older in nature. So as you can
Okay.
see, it has generated again the code. Let's review it.
Okay. I think the one thing to note here, Rohit, is we should review before directly using the code, right? Because
Yes,
it may or
that's
may not.
always the best practice.
Yeah.
So in this case, if you can see, our command or our prompt was instruction to, Einstein was much more specific that I wanted something which is
Hmm.
between 90 days or 120 days. So in this case, it has gone as back as like, 180 days while creating the test data. So it's checking how old is the product, or it's creating a test setup data.
Okay.
And I think it has given a wrong sort of suggestion. So what you were mentioning in this case, that we should
Hmm.
always check the code. So in this
Yeah.
case, it has sort of what we call hallucination, where it generates a response which may not align with your expectation, but is kind of syntax wise correct. So in this case, it has used some incorrect product utility classes to generate the methods, which don't exist obviously. So what you can do is you can always use the same command prompt and retry it. If you see that, okay, the result is way too off from what I was expecting, you can
Hmm.
always attempt a retry, which is far more easier than editing the you know, first generation, which you got.
Okay.
So you can see the another one. Now, let's review this one.
Okay.
Again, in this case, it's not as per my expectations. I'm going to attempt another retry just for till it aligns with my vision, or I may have to update my prompt as well. That can also be a use problem with my prompt as well. So always you can check, and it's very important to go through this and not expect hit and miss on the first attempt. Like If it's
That
not
is,
generating as per your expectation in the first attempt, it's useless because the time it takes to generate is few seconds versus the time it takes you to rewrite it. So it's always better option.
maybe we can modify the prompt this time and ask that to use some kind of standard method that are available for Tesla, like set created date or something.
Exactly. So in this case, after multiple attempts, I'm not able to get to my required result. It's giving me much more complicated or different result than what I expect. So we can go by that suggestion. Like if you know that I should use test.set create date to set a created date in past. So you can use that as a prompt. So I'm going to remove all this. I'll
Yep.
say write a test class for this. Use test.set created date to set a date in past for test data.
Hmm.
Now you can see the alignment is much more to our liking. The moment we change the prompt or
Prompt.
instruction, we've kind of nudged this into a direction, and it also gives you a feedback on how well you are in writing your prompt. My previous prompt was not as clear as this one.
Yep.
In this case, it has given me a very short method, but it's a very correct method in this case that it's generating the product, just inserting them, and it's using their IDs to kind of, set their start date and end date
Hmm.
as per our method.
Correct. This is good. I mean,
So
it's actually like a car. I mean, how well we drive it, it gives, it performs that well. So basically, we need to pass on the good instructions so that it can generate the good output. That's how it should be.
yes, exactly.
Okay,
Anything
understood.
else
No,
would you
no,
like
no, no.
to
This is
know?
really helpful. This is really helpful, Rohit. I might reach out to you for a set of different things, but I think this is where I can get started with it. I would try it out for a few days, and maybe in next session we can cover the other tools you were talking about, like GitHub Copilot. You mentioned that Einstein for developers is free, so at least to get started with it, I should be good. But I am really interested in seeing how much of tools like GitHub Copilot, which are not free. I mean, which they would be adding some more value, but you can maybe show me that some other time or whenever we connect next.
Sure, sure. I think, yeah, that's a next level of using generative AI tools, which are paid and they offer generally much more
Hmm.
expansive features than this one. But it's a good way to start.
Okay. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.